The morning alarms of Space Station Harmony echoed through the diplomatic quarters as Marcus Rivera adjusted his crisp Navy uniform. 3 years working as an aide to Ambassador Hartwell had taught him to expect the unexpected, but nothing had prepared him for today's assignment. The cultural exchange program with Nix Prime was supposed to be routine, just another stepping stone in humanity's expansion into the galactic community. Marcus ran his fingers through his dark hair, checking his appearance one final time in the mirror. His olive skin bore the faint tan of someone who spent too much time under artificial lighting, and his brown eyes held the weary wisdom of countless diplomatic encounters. At 28, he was young for his position, but his ability to remain calm under pressure had earned him respect among the embassy staff. The docking bay hummed with activity as the Nixian transport vessel approached. Marcus stood alongside a small welcoming committee, reviewing his notes on their guests. The Nixians were a mysterious species, pale, elegant beings from a world of eternal twilight. They were rumored to possess enhanced physical abilities and an unusual dietary requirement, though the specifics were classified above his clearance level. As the airlock cycled open, Marcus felt his breath catch. The Nixian delegation emerged like shadows given form, their movements fluid and graceful. But it was the woman at the front who captured his attention completely. She stood nearly his height, her skin a luminous silver white that seemed to glow under the station's lights. Her hair fell in obsidian waves past her shoulders, and when her violet eyes met his, he felt something stir deep within his chest. "Welcome to Harmony Station," Marcus said, stepping forward with practiced diplomacy. "I'm Marcus Rivera, aide to Ambassador Hartwell. We're honored to host the cultural exchange." The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to be both regal and intimate. "I am Celine Voss, cultural liaison for Nix Prime. The honor is ours, Marcus Rivera." Her voice carried an otherworldly quality, like music played in a minor key. Over the following days, Marcus found himself drawn to Celine's company. She was intelligent, witty, and possessed a dry humor that perfectly complemented his own. They spent hours walking through the station's observation decks, discussing philosophy, art, and the vast expanse of stars beyond the transparent aluminum windows. "Your species fascinates me," Celine confided one evening as they watched a nebulous crimson glow paint the darkness. "Humans are so vibrant. Full of life in ways my people have forgotten." "And your people?" Marcus asked, noting the melancholy in her voice. "What are they like?" Celine was quiet for a long moment. "We are creatures of shadow and silence. We exist, but we do not truly live. Not as you do." She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the nebula's light. "Perhaps that is why I find myself so drawn to your warmth." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Over the past week, their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, though neither had acknowledged it openly. "Celine, I..." The station's emergency klaxon suddenly blared, drowning out his words. Red warning lights bathed the observation deck as the station's AI announced, "Security breach in sectors 7 through 12. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." Marcus grabbed Celine's hand, noting how cool her skin felt against his palm. "This way. There's an emergency shelter near the diplomatic quarters." They ran through corridors filled with panicking civilians and rushing security personnel. The attack seemed coordinated. Small explosions rocked the station while armed figures in black combat suits moved through the lower levels. Marcus's training kicked in as he guided Celine toward safety, but she suddenly stumbled, pressing her hand against the wall for support. "Celine. What's wrong?" Her face had gone ashen, more pale than usual, and her breathing was labored. My supplies," she whispered. "They were in my quarters." "The explosion. What supplies?" Marcus demanded, genuine concern overriding diplomatic protocol. Celine closed her eyes, defeat evident in every line of her body. "I cannot explain. Your people would not understand. Would not accept what I am." Another explosion, closer this time, decided the matter. Marcus pulled her into an unused storage room, sealing the door behind them. In the dim emergency lighting, Celine looked almost ghostly, her usual ethereal beauty now tinged with desperation. "Tell me," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." Celine met his eyes, and he saw fear there, not of the attackers outside, but of his reaction to what she was about to reveal. "My people, we require a specific form of sustenance to survive. We call it the Crimson Essence, but you would know it by another name." Understanding dawned slowly, pieces clicking into place. The pale skin, the otherworldly grace, the way she always seemed slightly cold to the touch. "Blood," he said quietly. She nodded, shame coloring her features. "We have synthetic substitutes, carefully crafted to meet our needs without harming others. But mine were destroyed in the attack. Without it, I have perhaps 12 hours before." "Before what?" "Before I die," she whispered. "The hunger will consume me, and then fade to nothing." Marcus stared at her, processing this revelation. Everything he'd been taught about humanity's place in the galaxy, about the peaceful nature of their new alien allies, shifted in an instant. Yet as he looked at Celine, really looked at her, he saw not a monster, but the woman who had made him laugh, who had shared her dreams of exploring the universe, who had somehow captured his heart in just 1 week. "Then take mine," he said simply. Celine's eyes widened in shock. "Marcus, no. You do not understand what you offer. The act of feeding creates bonds between our species. Changes both parties involved. I could lose control, take too much." "Will you?" he interrupted. "Will you lose control?" She was quiet for a moment, studying his face in the dim light. No. I believe I have enough restraint. But the bond, Marcus. Once formed, it cannot be broken. You would be tied to me in ways your people have no words for." Marcus stepped closer, noting how her breathing had become more labored, how her hands trembled slightly. "And would that be so terrible? Being tied to you?" Something shifted in Celine's expression, hope warring with fear. "You would do this? Knowing what I am? What it would mean?" "I've gotten to know who you are this past week," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "That's what matters to me." Celine approached him slowly, reverently, as if he were something precious and fragile. "Sit," she instructed softly. "This will be easier if you are relaxed." Marcus settled onto a crate, tilting his head to expose his neck. His pulse hammered visibly beneath his skin, and he felt Celine's cool breath as she leaned close. "The pain will be brief," she murmured, her lips nearly brushing his ear. Then everything changes." Her fangs, delicate as crystal needles, pierced his skin with surprising gentleness. The initial sharp pain gave way to something else entirely, a warm, flowing sensation that seemed to connect them on a level beyond the physical. Marcus could feel Celine's hunger gradually ease, replaced by something deeper, more complex. When she finally pulled away, both were breathing heavily. A drop of crimson stained her lower lip, which she delicately licked away. Her violet eyes now held flecks of gold, and Marcus could swear he felt her heartbeat echoing his own. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice carrying new harmonics that resonated in his chest. Marcus touched the small wounds on his neck, already healing faster than should be possible. "Different. Like I can sense you even when you're not touching me." He looked up at her. "Is that normal?" Celine knelt beside him, her pale hands framing his face. "Nothing about this is normal. What we have done, no human and Nixian have ever shared the Crimson Bond. We are creating something entirely new." Before Marcus could respond, the storage room's door chimed with an override code. They sprang apart as Ambassador Hartwell entered, flanked by station security. "Rivera, thank God you're safe. We've contained the terrorist cell," but, the ambassador stopped mid-sentence, his eyes taking in the scene before him. The intimate way Marcus and Celine sat close together, the small wounds on Marcus's neck, the guilty expressions on both their faces. "Sir, I can explain," Marcus began, but Hartwell held up a hand. "Not here. Not now." The ambassador's voice was carefully neutral. "Ms. Voss, I trust you are unharmed." "I am well, Ambassador," Celine replied, standing gracefully. "Thanks to your aids, assistance." Hartwell's eyes narrowed slightly, but he merely nodded. "We'll debrief in 1 hour. All of us." As the ambassador left, Marcus and Celine were alone again. The weight of what they had done, and what it meant for both their peoples, settled between them like a living thing. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Celine took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Now we face the consequences. Your people will fear what they do not understand. Mine will see this as contamination, weakness." She met his eyes. "But we face it together." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the subtle pulse of their new connection. "Together," he agreed. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the two hearts that had just discovered they beat as one. But in a universe vast and often cold, sometimes the smallest spark of connection could ignite something revolutionary. The hunger had awakened more than just Celine's need for sustenance, it had awakened the possibility of love transcending the boundaries of species, the first step toward a future neither human nor Nixian could have imagined alone. Part 2, Forbidden Bonds. 3 months had passed since the incident that changed everything. Elena Thorne pushed her auburn hair behind her ear as she studied the holographic displays floating above her laboratory bench. The xenobiological data she'd collected was unprecedented, the cellular integration between human and Nixian physiology defied every scientific principle she'd learned in her 8 years of interspecies research. "Fascinating," she murmured, adjusting the molecular scanner's resolution. The blood samples from Marcus Rivera showed traces of Nixian proteins that shouldn't exist in human biochemistry, yet somehow not only survived but thrived. Her green eyes, magnified behind thick-rimmed glasses, traced the impossible genetic markers dancing across her screen. Elena had volunteered for this assignment despite the political implications. At 31, she was the youngest xenobiologist ever assigned to a diplomatic station, her reputation built on her willingness to explore the impossible. Her colleagues called her reckless, she preferred the term thorough. The laboratory door chimed, interrupting her concentration. Elena looked up to see Marcus Rivera entering with his Nixian partner, Celine. The changes in both were remarkable. Marcus's movements held a fluid grace that hadn't been there before, while Celine's usually pale complexion showed subtle flushes of warmth, evidence of their unprecedented bond. "Any progress on understanding what happened to us?" Celine asked, her violet eyes holding flecks of gold that seemed to shift in the artificial light. Elena removed her glasses, cleaning them nervously. "Your cellular structures have merged at the molecular level. It's creating entirely new protein chains that exhibit properties of both species. Frankly, it should be impossible. But it's not," Marcus said, taking Celine's hand. Even that simple gesture sparked visible bioelectric energy between them. "We can feel each other's emotions, share strength when needed." Yesterday, Celine lifted a support beam that should have required 3 humans. Before Elena could respond, the laboratory's secondary door opened with a sharp hiss. The figure that entered made the temperature seem to drop several degrees. He was tall, even by Nixian standards, with the same pale luminescence as Celine but carrying himself like a predator barely held in check. His black hair was shorter than most Nixians preferred, and his violet eyes held no warmth, only cold assessment. "Sister," he said, his voice carrying the musical quality of their species but edged with steel. "You look different." Celine straightened, her free hand moving protectively toward Marcus. "Caius. I did not expect you so soon." Elena found herself studying the newcomer with scientific interest. Where Celine moved with ethereal grace, this Caius moved like contained violence. His clothing was functional rather than decorative, dark fabrics that wouldn't restrict movement, boots designed for combat rather than diplomacy. The council sent me to assess the contamination, Caius continued, his gaze shifting to Marcus with obvious disdain. They wish to understand how deeply this infection has spread. It's not contamination, Elena interjected, stepping forward. It's evolution. Two species finding a way to bridge the gap between. Caius's attention snapped to her, and Elena felt her words die in her throat. Up close, she could see the predatory intelligence in his eyes, the way he catalogued every detail of her appearance and dismissed her as insignificant. "And you are?" he asked, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care about the answer. "Elena Thorne, xenobiologist." She forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I've been studying the bond between your sister and Marcus. The scientific implications are remarkable." "Science," Caius repeated, as if the word tasted bitter. "Tell me, scientist, what happens to a Nixian who allows their essence to be corrupted by alien influences?" Elena felt anger flare in her chest. "Nothing is being corrupted. If anything, both species are being enhanced by the connection. The cellular regeneration alone is an abomination," Caius finished coldly. "My sister was pure. Now she carries the genetic material of a lesser species." Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Lesser species?" The tension in the room became palpable. Elena could see Celine trying to position herself between her brother and her bonded partner, while Caius seemed to radiate barely controlled aggression. "Perhaps," Elena said quickly, "we should focus on the data rather than philosophical differences. Caius, would you be willing to provide baseline samples for comparison? Understanding normal Nixian physiology would help." The station's emergency klaxon suddenly blared, cutting off her words. The laboratory's lights shifted to amber as the AI's voice echoed through the corridors. "Pirate vessels detected. All personnel to secure positions. Security teams to defensive stations." Caius moved with inhuman speed, producing a curved blade that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Raiders. They choose their timing poorly." Elena grabbed her research data, uploading it to secure servers as explosions rocked the station. Through the laboratory's viewport, she could see sleek black ships peeling away from the station's hull after depositing boarding parties. "The research labs will be prime targets," Marcus said, his diplomatic training overriding personal tensions. "They'll want to steal or destroy anything valuable. Then we defend it," Caius stated simply, testing the edge of his blade. "We?" Elena asked, surprised by his sudden protectiveness. Caius glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You study my sister's condition. That makes your research relevant to Nixian interests." The laboratory door exploded inward as armed figures in environmental suits stormed through the smoke. Elena dove behind her workstation as pulse fire filled the air. She watched in amazement as Caius moved like liquid shadow, his blade finding gaps in armor with surgical precision. But there were too many attackers. Elena saw Marcus take a grazing shot to his shoulder, saw Celine falter as her bonded partner's pain echoed through their connection. Caius was being forced back, outnumbered despite his superior skills. Elena's scientific mind raced. The raiders wanted her research, but they also wanted to eliminate witnesses. She looked at the chemical storage units lining one wall of her laboratory, compounds designed for xenobiological research, many of them highly volatile when mixed. "Caius," she shouted over the weapon fire. "Can you get everyone to the emergency exit in 30 seconds? The Nixian warrior glanced back at her, understanding flickering in his violet eyes. 20 seconds would be better. Elena began combining compounds with practiced speed, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. 20 seconds it is. Caius moved with renewed purpose, no longer trying to eliminate the raiders but simply creating a path of retreat. He grabbed Elena's research equipment with one hand while herding the others toward the exit with deadly efficiency. "Now!" Elena shouted, throwing the improvised chemical mixture toward the raiders' position. They cleared the laboratory just as Elena's concoction detonated, filling the space with caustic smoke that sent the attackers into panicked retreat. In the corridor beyond, Elena found herself pressed against Caius as they caught their breath, acutely aware of his alien scent, something like winter air and distant storms. "Clever," he said, his voice carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "For a human." Elena bristled. "My species isn't inherently inferior, you know. We just express intelligence differently." Caius studied her face in the emergency lighting, something shifting in his expression. "Perhaps. Your quick thinking saved us all. The station security will handle the remaining raiders," Marcus said, checking his wounded shoulder. "But they'll be back. Pirates always return if they think there's something valuable to steal." "Then we ensure the research is protected," Caius replied. His gaze lingered on Elena. "This bond between species, it may be more significant than I initially believed." Over the following days, as station security worked to repair damage and investigate the pirate attack, Elena found herself working closely with Caius. He proved to be surprisingly knowledgeable about Nixian biochemistry, his warrior's training including extensive knowledge of anatomy and physiology. "Your people's cellular structure is remarkable," Elena commented as they reviewed genetic sequences together. "The way you process energy, the enhanced healing factors, it's like you're designed for survival in hostile environments." "We are," Caius replied, adjusting the holographic display with practiced ease. "Nix Prime is not a gentle world. Those who could not adapt did not survive to reproduce." Elena noticed he'd removed the formal distance from his voice, speaking to her more as an equal than a curiosity. "And now that survival mechanism is merging with human adaptability. Your sister and Marcus aren't just bonded, they're becoming something new." Caius was quiet for a moment, studying the genetic data floating between them. "Something unprecedented," he agreed. "The Council fears change, but perhaps." He trailed off, his eyes meeting hers. "Perhaps change is not always corruption." Elena felt her heart skip a beat at the intensity of his gaze. Working together, she'd begun to see past his cold exterior to the intelligence and even protectiveness beneath. He was nothing like the humans she'd dated, more direct, more intense, but also more honest than anyone she'd ever known. "Caius," she began, then stopped, unsure how to voice what she was feeling. He stepped closer, his pale skin seeming to glow in the laboratory's soft lighting. "I feel it too," he said quietly. "This attraction between us. It should not be possible." "Why not?" Elena asked, her scientific mind warring with her emotional response. "If your sister can bond with a human, why couldn't we?" "Because I am not my sister," Caius interrupted, but his voice was gentle rather than harsh. "I am a warrior, trained to see threats and eliminate them. I was sent here to judge whether humans posed a danger to Nixian purity." "And what's your judgment?" Elena whispered, acutely aware of how close they stood. Caius reached up, his cool fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "My judgment is compromised," he admitted. "By a human scientist who risks herself to protect others, who sees wonder where others see impossibility." Elena leaned into his touch, marveling at the contrast between his cool skin and the warmth building inside her chest. "The research shows compatibility between our species. Not just Marcus and Celine, all of us. The genetic markers suggest we're more similar than different." "Similar enough for this?" Caius asked, leaning down until his breath whispered across her lips. "Only one way to find out," Elena replied, rising on her toes to meet him. Their kiss was tentative at first, an exploration of differences and similarities. Caius's lips were cooler than human normal, but they warmed under hers. Elena could taste something like starlight and shadow, exotic and intoxicating. When they parted, both were breathing heavily. Elena could see new flecks of green in Caius's violet eyes, while she felt energized in ways that defied explanation. "The bond," Caius said wonderingly. "It forms so easily between us." Elena pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. Not just the bond. Something more. Something that transcends species. Before Caius could respond, the laboratory door chimed with an incoming message. Marcus's voice filled the air. "Elena, Caius, you need to see this. We've received word from both Earth and Nix Prime. Official delegations are coming. This is about to become much bigger than just the four of us." Elena and Caius exchanged glances, understanding passing between them. Their private discovery was about to become a galactic political issue. "Whatever comes next," Caius said, taking her hand, "we face it together." Elena squeezed his fingers, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. "Together," she agreed. Outside their laboratory, the universe continued its ancient dance, but within these walls, two more hearts had found their rhythm, one human, one Nixian, both reaching toward a future where love might prove stronger than the fears that divided their species. The diplomatic chamber aboard the neutral vessel Concordia hummed with tension as representatives from both Earth and Nix Prime prepared for what many considered the most important interspecies negotiation in galactic history. Dante Cross adjusted his charcoal gray suit one final time, his steel blue eyes reviewing the briefing materials on his tablet. At 35, he was Earth's youngest appointed ambassador, his reputation built on an uncanny ability to find common ground in impossible situations. The chamber itself was a marvel of neutral design, crystalline walls that shifted between warm and cool tones, gravity fields adjusted to accommodate both human and Nixian physiology, and atmospheric controls that maintained perfect comfort for all attendees. Despite the technical perfection, Dante could feel the weight of history pressing down on everyone present. "The Nixian delegation is requesting formal proceedings," his aide whispered, sliding a data pad across the polished table. "They're not treating this as a discussion, they want a full tribunal." Dante nodded grimly. 2 weeks had passed since word of the human-Nixian bonds had reached both home worlds. The political firestorm had been immediate and intense. Earth's xenophobic factions demanded that infected humans be quarantined, while Nixian purists called for the immediate severing of all diplomatic ties. The chamber's main doors opened with a whisper of displaced air, and Dante felt his breath catch. The Nixian delegation entered like living shadows, their movements perfectly synchronized and utterly silent. At their head walked a woman who seemed to embody elegance itself, tall and willowy, with the characteristic pale luminescence of her species, but carrying herself with an authority that made the very air around her seem to bend in deference. Her hair was silver white, pulled back in an intricate style that revealed the graceful line of her neck, and she wore robes of deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When her eyes, a striking shade of violet that seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom, met his across the chamber, Dante felt something electric pass between them. "I am Nix Shadowmere, High Council representative for Nix Prime," she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species but underscored with unmistakable power. "I speak with the full authority of the Council of Shadows." Dante rose from his seat, inclining his head in formal greeting. "Ambassador Dante Cross, representing Earth's Interspecies Relations Council. We're honored by your presence, Counselor Shadowmere." Nix's eyes studied him with unsettling intensity, as if cataloging every detail of his appearance and finding him somehow wanting. "The honor remains to be determined, Ambassador. We are here to address a crisis that threatens the fundamental nature of both our species." As they took their seats, Dante found himself acutely aware of Nix's every movement. She possessed a fluid grace that made human motion seem clumsy by comparison, yet there was something about her bearing that suggested steel beneath silk, a leader accustomed to making difficult decisions and living with their consequences. "Let us begin with the facts," Nix said, activating a holographic display that showed detailed medical scans. "For humans have now formed unprecedented bonds with Nixian individuals. These bonds are creating genetic changes that violate the natural order our species have maintained for millennia." "With respect, Counselor," Dante replied, "the term violation suggests something wrong or harmful. From what our scientists have observed, these bonds appear to be beneficial to all parties involved." Nix's violet eyes flashed. "Beneficial? You speak of contamination as if it were evolution. My people have maintained genetic purity for over 10,000 years. We are what we are because we have not allowed ourselves to be diluted by foreign influences. And yet, Dante countered, pulling up his own data displays, the evidence suggests that our species may be more compatible than previously thought. The cellular integration isn't random, it's following patterns that suggest a fundamental biological relationship. For the next several hours, they debated the scientific, political, and philosophical implications of the bonds. Dante found himself impressed by Nyx's intelligence and depth of knowledge. She wasn't simply parroting council doctrine, she was thinking through each argument, weighing evidence, and responding with genuine insight. More troubling was his growing awareness of her as more than just a political adversary. The way she gestured when making a point, the subtle shifts in her expression when she was considering new information, the rare moments when her formal demeanor slipped to reveal the passionate conviction beneath, all of it fascinated him in ways that had nothing to do with diplomacy. You argue for progress, Nyx said during a brief recess, approaching him as the other delegates mingled. But progress toward what end? What happens to the essence of what makes us distinct species if we all become the same hybrid creature? Dante turned to face her fully, noting how the chamber's shifting lights played across her silver hair. Maybe the question isn't what we lose, but what we gain. For individuals have found connections that transcend everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships. Isn't that worth exploring? Nyx was quiet for a moment, her violet eyes searching his face. You speak of connection as if it were always beneficial. But some connections are dangerous, Ambassador. They can lead to the loss of self, the abandonment of duty. And others, Dante replied softly, can lead to becoming more than you ever thought possible. Something shifted in Nyx's expression, a crack in her formal composure that revealed unexpected vulnerability. You are not what I expected from a human diplomat. What did you expect? Someone easier to dismiss, she admitted, then seemed to catch herself. We should return to the proceedings. The afternoon session grew more contentious as extremist factions from both species presented their cases. Earth's Purity Coalition demanded immediate quarantine of the bonded humans, while the Nyxian Order of Shadows called for complete severance of diplomatic relations. These abominations must be contained before they spread their contamination further, declared Councillor Vex, a hardline Nyxian purist. Every moment we delay increases the risk of irreversible damage to our genetic heritage. Dante watched Nyx's reaction to her colleague's words, noting the subtle tightening around her eyes. Councillor Shadowmere, he said carefully, do you share Councillor Vex's assessment? Nyx was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with competing loyalties. The preservation of Nyxian purity has been my life's work, she said finally. But I am also sworn to seek truth, regardless of where it leads. And what truth do you see here? Nyx activated a new holographic display, showing genetic comparisons that made several delegates gasp. This morning, I completed a comprehensive analysis of the data provided by both sides. The results are unexpected. The display showed human and Nyxian DNA sequences side by side, highlighting areas of surprising similarity. Our species are not as different as we have always believed. These similarities suggest a common origin, perhaps even a shared evolutionary past. Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. Councillor Vex rose from his seat. This is preposterous. Nyxians evolved on Nyx Prime, in isolation, perfecting ourselves through millennia of careful selection. Did we? Nyx interrupted, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. Or did we lose something essential along the way? These bonds aren't creating contamination, they're restoring connections that existed long before our species forgot they were once one. The implications of her words sent shockwaves through both delegations. Dante stared at her, understanding flooding through him. You're suggesting we're not separate species at all. I'm suggesting, Nyx replied, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his pulse race, that what we're witnessing isn't an aberration, it's a return to what we were always meant to be. The chamber erupted in heated arguments as delegates from both sides rejected or embraced Nix's revelation. Through the chaos, Dante found himself focused entirely on the Nixian counselor who had just sacrificed her political career to speak an uncomfortable truth. During the emergency recess that followed, Dante found Nix standing alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The anger and confusion from the chamber seemed to fall away as he approached her. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen a diplomat do," he said softly. Nix didn't turn around, but he could see her reflection in the transparent aluminum, beautiful and tragic. "Perhaps both. The council will likely strip me of my position for what I've said today. Was it worth it?" "Truth usually is," she replied, finally facing him. "Even when it costs everything." Dante stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't name or resist. "It doesn't have to cost everything. There are other paths, other ways to serve your people." "Are there?" Nix asked, and for the first time since he'd met her, she sounded uncertain. "I have spent centuries in service to an ideal that may have been built on a lie. What purpose do I serve now?" "The same one you always have," Dante said, reaching out to touch her arm. "Seeking truth. Protecting your people. The only difference is that now you understand your people includes more than just Nixians." Nix looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "This attraction I feel toward you, is it real, or simply another symptom of the bond phenomenon?" Dante's heart hammered against his ribs. "I don't know. Does it matter?" "It should," Nix whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "I am violating every principle I was raised to uphold." "Maybe those principles were wrong," Dante suggested, his thumb tracing the cool silk of her skin. "Maybe connection isn't contamination, maybe it's completion." When Nix kissed him, it was with the desperate intensity of someone choosing love over duty for the first time in her life. Dante tasted starlight and shadow on her lips, felt the cool fire of her alien passion igniting something in his own soul. When they parted, both were breathing heavily. Nix's violet eyes now held flecks of blue, while Dante felt energized in ways that defied explanation. "The bond," Nix said wonderingly. "It forms so quickly, so naturally." "As if we were always meant for this," Dante agreed, pulling her closer. "As if all the political barriers were just obstacles we created to keep ourselves apart." They returned to the chamber together, no longer adversaries but partners in seeking a path forward. The remaining delegates watched with varying degrees of shock and approval as the human ambassador and Nixian counselor presented a united front. "The evidence is clear," Dante announced. "Our species share a common heritage. The bonds we're witnessing aren't anomalies, they're proof of a connection that transcends politics and prejudice. We propose the establishment of a joint colony," Nix added, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "A place where humans and Nixians can explore these connections freely, away from the fears and restrictions of both our worlds." The debate that followed was fierce, but the momentum had shifted. Marcus and Celine, Elena and Caius joined them via holographic link, adding their voices to the call for understanding and acceptance. As the session concluded with agreements to establish the proposed colony, Dante and Nix stood together on the observation deck once more, watching the stars that no longer seemed like barriers between worlds. "What happens now?" Nix asked, her hand finding his. "Now we build something new," Dante replied, bringing her fingers to his lips. "Something that honors both our peoples while creating space for what we're becoming." Nix smiled, the first truly unguarded expression he'd seen from her. "I find myself looking forward to an uncertain future." "That's not something I ever expected to say." "The best adventures are uncertain," Dante said, wrapping his arms around her. "That's what makes them worth taking." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but for the first time in millennia, the future they illuminated was one where love might prove stronger than the fears that had kept two peoples apart. The council's judgment had become something none of them expected, not condemnation, but the first step toward a new dawn where hearts could bridge the vast distances between worlds.